Well, we come today to the last lesson of this second unit of this winter quarter, and we want to take a look at it on today. Our winter quarter is entitled Justice, Law, and History. And this is the winter quarter for the months of December, January, and February. And we're talking about justice as presented in the Old Testament under the law. And we're looking at some of the circumstances that construed God's people's thoughts on justice. And today we come to the close of unit number 2 for the month of January, entitled God, the Source of Justice. And today we're concluding our look at God's justice in the lives of his people through the gift of the law. And our lesson for today, lesson number 9 for January the 30th, 2022, January the 31st, 2022, is entitled Countercultural Compassion. Our printed passage is Deuteronomy 24, verse 10 through 21. Now, the book of Deuteronomy recounts God's guidelines and his commands to live by in community. And these are God's commands and his guidelines to his people and how to live in community. And just the gist of all of the commands can come down to two things. One, notably, Jesus talks about, and that is love. And then we can come back and add to that dignity and respect, and by doing what is right. These commands and laws of God really spoke about love, dignity, and respect for one another, and simply by doing what is right to the other person. But God is ever the loving God, and God knew that this just wasn't about the Hebrews at that time. It wasn't just about his chosen nation, but he wanted to use them to be a witness to all of the world. So even in God's commands and his guidelines, God still gave provision for the servants, for the strangers, as well as the poor. And if you will, consider verse number 18, the why he does it. And verse number 18 helps us to see that you do unto others, that golden rule, as you will have them do unto you. And verse number 18, God tells his people, remember that you were servants and strangers in Egypt. Remember that you yourself found yourself poor and servants and strangers and aliens there in Egypt. But I brought you out, gave you your own place, and I also gave you servants, amen, in this new promised land of Canaan. So God said, don't you ever forget of where you came from. And therefore you ought to do unto others, and you would have them do unto you. So God calls his people to be a nation of love, a nation of peace, a nation of justice, a nation of righteousness, a nation of mercy. And even today, God still calls us to be like him, for he is a God of love. He's a God of peace. He's a God of justice. He's a God of righteousness. He's a God of mercy. And he still calls us today to be like him. No matter where we are, no matter what the situation may be, God calls us to be holy like him. Let's hold up the blood-stained banner of justice. Jesus is the perfect example. Let's keep him held high, and let's walk in justice. And as we walk in justice, we can be a witness to all of the world.